So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We're extremely excited about the information we're going to show you today. And Gary Moyle, who is president of QuadCore, will be making that presentation. Gary, would you like to begin?
Sure, thanks, Rochelle. What I guess I'll do, I'll take my camera off. You all see me for a few minutes. I'll save the bandwidth. That'll let me pick my nose freely as well. So let's do that. So we have about an hour today, I understand. My presentation, I think, will last around 20 minutes. If possible, I'll try and show you a quick demonstration of the software as well, though I am having difficulty. Most of the demonstration I had planned was for my mobile app, which is working fine until I connect to this Teams meeting, and then it starts to degrade quite badly. But I will try. Let's keep all of the lines muted if we can in the typical fashion. I'll try and get through the presentation the best I can. Then obviously using the chat feature, or you can come online at the end of the presentation and let's ask questions and dive deep here into the product as you wish. But my presentation, I think, should last around 20 to 30 minutes. That's all. Okay, Rochelle, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can.
So today we're talking about an industry pack that QuadCore have designed for the rental industry. I was told I had to put up the familiar slide we've all seen that tells me everything I'm going to say to you is a lie, and I think you've all seen it, right? Basically, there's nobody committing to do anything here, despite the fact the product I'm going to show you is finished. But nevertheless, we have to show you the legal slide, of course, so I think everybody's familiar with that. And this represents QuadCore presentation, of course, and not Infor presentation, but this is a QuadCore presentation just to clarify everything. Who are we? Well, we've been around since 2012. We, prior to being an Infor partner, were an Epicor partner. We did that for about 3 years, 2009 to 2012. Didn't find that particularly palatable. That was challenging, being a partner in the Epicor ecosystem. So we moved across to Infor in 2012, and we've enjoyed that decision, of course. For most of our time as a partner, we've been a gold channel partner. And our primary focus, which is different to many, was equipment service. Many of the partners within the SyteLine world go after manufacturing as a primary focus. We decided not to do that. And we've been spending all this time, best part of 10 years now, with the primary focus being on equipment service. So that's where we've lived, and we have a lot of domain expertise in that area as well. Why have we decided to create a rental pack, of all the things? Well, basically it was because we were primarily focused on the service industry. And what happens in the service industry with our customers and customers of Infor as well, we often find that it bleeds into the rental requirement. It's not an industry we pursue. We don't go after rental companies, but we find the service industry bleeds in to the requirement for rental at times. We were going to market with the ISM product, which was pretty much aimed at the service industry. And in effect, what Infor recognized was, like we were recognizing in the partner community, these rental needs were starting to come out for the service industry. So Infor began to create their own rental functionality inside the ISM product back in 2017. It was a little slow, and we felt it was too slow. So we, QuadCore, took it upon ourselves to create our own rental extension back then in 2017. It was very deep, very rich, and we also chose to invest in it a second time and move it from on-prem to the multi-tenant cloud in 2019. Infor discontinued the SKU of ISM in November 2020, which left us with deliberation. We'd invested heavily in the rental industry already for a product that Infor had discontinued. So we chose in February 2021 to go in a new direction. We decided to migrate the functionality that we'd written for ISM to SyteLine, and that's what we began in February 2021. So that's the history as to why this is where it is and so on. And what would it mean to you guys, the users of SyteLine, and I believe there could be some partner people on the line today as well. But this is what we generally find is, many people are using a workaround. They've written a personalization perhaps. They're using a third party. They can't really get SyteLine to do their rental capabilities, so they've bought something else. Their manual systems, spreadsheets and Word documents and pieces of paper and all the other things. So there are many ways to, get around the rental problem. And that could be you guys on the line today, could be using many of those or one of those. Everybody wants a single version of the truth, right? We don't really want another system and our system. We just want everything in one system. And then all the things that are just business and just common sense, right? We want sales flexibility. We want to boost our equipment availability and our equipment utilization, strive for excellent optimized supply chain management, and increase our equipment lifecycle value. It's very expensive to have this equipment around, and we want to make sure it's earning money for us, of course. So what I'm going to talk to you today is, what are we trying to do? Where are we going? Why are we going there? Then the majority of today's session will be looking at the product itself. It'll be in PowerPoint format predominantly. I've had to do that because I'm not sure my demo is going to work, but hopefully I'll show you it in real life as well towards the end. And then what we're going to be doing in the future as well. This is just release number 1 so far. And we'll be talking to you about what the roadmap means for the product as well. So here was the plan. Bear in mind, this was in February last year, a year ago. And the idea was to leverage QuadCore's domain expertise that we gained with ISM in the rental industry between 2017 and 2020. We decided to build the rental industry pack for SyteLine multi-tenant cloud. And that brings a bunch of challenges, as many of you on the line will know, but that was our goal to deliver this to the multi-tenant cloud. We commenced work in April 2021, and the commitment is to create 6 releases over 3 years, with each release being 6 months apart. So that's what we've committed to do, and that's what we're going to do. The first release was scheduled for a January 2022 delivery to the marketplace, and we've actually got it ready for this month, February 2022. So we missed that by a month, but we're reasonably pleased with that. Our cadence going forward will be the same as Infor's cadence for major functionality releases. So our cadence will match. We'll be releasing major functionality releases in March and September of each year. And of course, all of the other 5 months in a 6-monthly cycle will be small tweaks or bug fixes and so on. So we're falling in line with the Infor best practice then. First release then, it's now. It's February 2022. It's available. It's basically aimed at this point at the heavy equipment industry. And I think of that as construction, pictures of it. All the pictures on this slide are all of heavy construction. And pseudo construction. Those things around the construction industry will also fit this product as well. And right now, first release will just be Office-based transactional capability. There won't be any mobile in our first release. This is the product as it is. I mean, literally, this is what you see. It's made up of, it's an optional module. Okay, so it sits in the menus where you see the optional modules. It's called Equipment, Rental, and Service Industry Pack. Because there are 2 sides to this. Is obviously we are majoring on the rental capability of the product. We'll be having plenty of releases that strengthen the service capability of the solution as well. You see on the right, when you look at the pictures, if you like, you do see the menu options, and it does show you how it all lays out. It's all standard SyteLine, nothing strange we're doing, activities, files, queries, reports, and utilities, of course. And then we've got 12 forms that are part of our initial release and 5 reports. So that's what's coming with our first release. I'm going to go through a lot of it, if not all of it, in the next few slides. This is a setup scenario, right? This isn't transactional. So a piece of equipment, the system needs to know how you charge that piece of equipment out. So what we have is we have the ability to use, standard SyteLine functionality, but with more rates in there that the rental industry needs. So if you look down there in the boxes, you're going to see some rates you don't see today. And predominantly those are the hourly rate, which doesn't exist today, which the rental industry needs, the daily rate, and the 28-day rate. That's the golden egg, right? Everybody needs 28-day rate. That's the majority of the rental industry. And it gives you those 13 billing periods per year instead of 12 on the monthly cycle. We've also got on the right-hand side of that a minimum billing amount as well. So that really comes in, especially in the hourly world. You know, if you are renting a piece of equipment by the hour, you might say the minimum billing is $50. You know, I'm not going to rent that equipment to you for 1 hour at $5. The minimum billing might be $50, even if you only keep it for 30 minutes, for example. That's really the I would call it the main setup equipment. What I would say at the bottom here is, if you can see my cursor, the other key item that we didn't get into this release, we were hoping to, was equipment cost. Okay, and I'll talk more about it in coming slides. But if you want to know the profitability of your contract, the majority of the cost comes from depreciation of the asset and the ongoing service of the asset, of course, and that is currently missing from the standard SyteLine product. We were hoping to get that into our first release, but it will be available in June. And I'll talk more about it in coming slides. The flow begins with equipment availability. So this is time-phased equipment availability. And what this has done is it's meant we've restructured some things in SyteLine. So if I have this piece of equipment, which we know as a unit, right? It's a unit in standard SyteLine as well. It really depends where it resides as to whether it is something that's in the rental fleet or it's something that's in our own fleet for sale, right? Because we could be a distributor as well. We might sell this equipment, and also we might have a rental fleet as well. So basically what's happened is we've gone one level deeper into the software. We've gone into the item stockroom location form, and we've differentiated an item stockroom location for sale and for rent. So when you have, let's say in this screenshot, I've got 8 pieces of equipment here that are available for rent, but I could have 20 or 30 in total. And this is really only showing the data that exists in an item stockroom that's been flagged as available for rent, of course. And that's the core reason. And then many of you, in the manufacturing world have seen a classic sort of time phase scenario. But what this is doing is it's giving you information based on the contract line, of course. So this isn't really classic MRP that we think of. I have a widget in inventory, and I've got jobs consuming them, or I've got purchase orders replenishing them. This is different. The demand for the unit comes from a contract line with a date and a start date and an end date, of course. And then obviously I can look into the future with my availability, and I could answer a customer question on the call, real live data. Do you have, in this case, it's a forklift truck, available between the dates of here and here? Now, what you're also going to hear about is the concept of rent for re-rent. So yes, this is my fleet. I have 8 pieces of equipment in my rental fleet. But if I hit minus, then obviously I'm overbooked, right? I've overcommitted myself. But I can go out and I can create a purchase order to one of my competitors, perhaps, and rent something from them to allow me to satisfy my rental obligation to my customer. So when we talk about, what makes a negative, it's quite obvious. A negative is a contract commitment. But a positive in this is twofold. It is the return of the equipment from a contract, okay, and that will be a positive in this time phase, the equipment coming back. But then secondly, it could also be a purchase order, so it could be cross-referenced to a purchase order as well as a contract, that I have a purchase order agreement that on that date I expect a piece of equipment to come back or to be delivered to me or cross-docked and just shipped direct to the client, of course. And that would be a positive in my time-phased availability as well. So that's really where, the availability begins. The question comes in by email or phone call, do you have this piece of equipment? And this is where we'd expect to go to find out whether we have one or not. Okay, into the rental contract itself, a few changes to the contracts today, which are in SyteLine. And the first one really is on the right here. So we have stages to a contract. So in the rental industry, it's quite common that you're going to be estimating a lot and not particularly winning a lot of business, of course. So, the concept of an estimate is, to many people, it's fluff. It's like, okay, it doesn't mean anything. People are shopping around. They're asking me what my prices are. Do I have availability? And we can actually create a contract in estimate stage. And you'll see soon that we create an estimate report for that as well. And then it doesn't count. So if I go back to this slide, which is my availability, all of my estimates do not count against my forward allocation. We think a lot of that is fluff, high instances of people calling around and never taking your equipment. So an estimate by that nature will not count towards my future commitment. As you migrate it through an estimate, it will move into a reservation. And I liken this very much to what we do all the time. We rent cars from Avis and Hertz and so on. It's very similar. When I move it to the reservation stage, it becomes something I now do have a commitment for. I've got a signature. I haven't got an agreement yet, of course. The agreement will happen when I actually deliver the equipment or the customer comes to the counter. That's when the agreement will be signed. But in effect, I have something, well, let's call it more binding, right? Somebody has said they're coming and they've committed. We haven't built in anything at this point to take payment against a reservation, but that could well come in the future. What you can't do in reservation or contract stage is I can't use the other functionality that you see on here. Because again, prospects, we know many people will just be, not customers of ours, not long-term customers. They're just calling, they're shopping around. So the other thing that's been included in the rental contract is the concept of a prospect. So if I choose a prospect, obviously, these fields will act as you would expect. The customer will become grayed out if I choose a prospect, and then we'll move forward and everything will work according to the prospect form. And those who know SyteLine today know there is a prospect form, and it turns into a customer, and we follow the same flow, of course. And that's not allowed. So literally, just to make that point, that's the point I was trying to make there. I can have an estimate linked to a prospect. That's okay. But I can't have a reservation linked to a prospect, and it will force you to go and create the customer from the prospect if I'm starting to take serious reservations. And clearly that would be the same if we march to the final step, when you either deliver that equipment or you have the customer come into your rental counter, the final step in the process is to move from reservation to contract, of course. And then it's black and white. I think, everybody would accept you had to have a customer record at that point. The other thing that comes in here is some checking in and checking out functionality. I could have a contract for 10 items. There could be multiple quantities of each item, whether they're units, which we all relate to, and that's what this back case is for this, is a heavy piece of equipment. So it's probably serialized. It's probably a unit, but it's not required. Okay, so I could just have items out of inventory that are not serialized as well. But there's some nice sophisticated checking in and checking out as well that comes with the contract. Okay, and once you've gone below the contract header, there's a couple of more extra features as well. Some you've seen. Okay, so are these required? Well, I'm not sure about hourly and daily in terms of billing frequency. If anybody wants to create a daily invoice, I'd probably be surprised, but we thought, well, what the hell, we'll just throw it in there. So, but this one is super important, of course, the 28-day billing frequency. So when I check out my piece of equipment at the contract line level, I will get the first invoice created for the first period, and then all subsequent invoicing cycles will be based on the billing frequency that you've chosen. And 28 days becomes the big one that everybody's interested and requires in the rental industry. There's also two different rates in the system for a piece of equipment. There's the standard rate, and you saw that earlier in the rates table. But there's also a pro rata rate as well. So if that customer keeps that piece of equipment longer than what they intimated in the beginning of the contract, so in my example, it might be the customer intimated they wanted it for 28 days, that's okay. They kept it another few days, so the pro rata rate could be daily, perhaps. And there's probably a premium to that. They probably pay more than 1/28 for it. So in effect, you have a pro rata rate there. So you see down here in my example, it's fairly typical. I've got $100 for every 28 days. Here's what I'm going to charge you. But if you keep it for every other day, I'll be charging you $10 per day over and above, of course. Now, those who are in the rental industry might ask the question that you should ask, and that is, what happens with what we call best pricing. That is not in the original release today, but again, that is coming in our June release, and we call that best pricing to those who are in the industry. And what it means is that if there is a better rate available to the customer, it will automatically go and choose it. So let me give you an example. I'm charging you $100 a day for this piece of equipment, and my weekly rate is $300 a day. So once I get beyond 3 days and I get into my day 4 and my day 5, I'll be at $400 charge, $500 charge, and so on. The system actually knows that the weekly rate is now a better rate for that customer, and it will flip them to the best rate automatically. So if they bring that equipment back after 6 days, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, it will charge them the weekly rate despite the contract having been created for a daily rate. And that's called best pricing. I would say it's an industry standard pretty much. Not everybody follows it, but it's very common. And we have that built into our second release, which is coming in June of this year. So right now, out of the box, we're not going to have that with our first release. Other things about the, it keeps jumping. I'm not touching anything. I do apologize. But I'm trying to move my cursor up here as well. When I'm at the contract line, there are other things that come into play. And what those are purchase orders and service orders, right? So I have a rental contract for this piece of equipment. It's for 28 days. I may have a commitment to go and do planned preventative maintenance on that equipment. That might be part of what I'm charging the customer for. So I could have planned preventative maintenance service orders that get linked to this contract line, of course. I could have break fix. The customer calls me, hey, that piece of junk you just rented us has just broken down. And I might have to dispatch a technician to go and fix it, of course. And then obviously I, again, have a service order with costs that would impact, my profitability of my contract, of course. The second one that I mentioned before is what we call this bottom line here, which is rent for re-rent, another common industry requirement. I don't have this piece of equipment. I'm predicting I don't have it. I looked at my availability. I actually got ahead of it. I called my competitor down the road. They have one. I raised a purchase order to have my competitor's piece of equipment available for my customer, and I'm in effect creating a purchase order back to my competitor, and I will rent that equipment from them. So that's also important, and that's functionality we've created that I can actually cross-reference a purchase order to a contract. All the reports are in place, as you might expect. These are 3 of the 5 reports that we've designed, and they just follow the obvious things you saw on the earlier slide. We have an estimate report, we have a reservation report, and we have a final agreement report. And the nice thing about that is they tie into the customer document profile that we all know. When you send your invoices and purchase orders and everything else, these 3 also tie into the customer document profile for automatically emailing them to your prospects or customers. Okay, carrying on. It's the equipment pick list. So I've won my business, right? I've found my availability. I sent them the estimate. We turned it into a reservation. They agreed. And now it's time to take action. So typically, we now need to go and find the equipment in the yard. And this takes the form of a pick list today. It's a piece of paper, and you'll see in the roadmap, we do intend to make this electronic. And I have a pick list, which is very similar to, the classic sales order pick list that I'm picking for shipping, of course, but it just has some tweaks for the rental industry. So first of all, if I do not specify the unit on the contract line, I'm going to be presented with all of the units that are actually in my yard right now and where they are. And then in effect, this is the top scenario. Okay, in this case, I did not tell the picker which unit to go and find. Therefore, there are 6 pieces of equipment that are currently in the yard. And simply, it's a matter of which one do they find first. I mean, most people they're lazy, right? They're not going to go to the back and do a rotation system. They're just going to find the first one they can. And then in effect, they'll just check the box here and say, okay, I took this serial number or this unit number. And then in effect, how many are available, of course, here. And then they're just going to come down and fill in the boxes. Now, in the bottom case, though, this is different. This is where I've literally, in the office, when I created the contract line, I was very specific, and I said, I want you to go and find this unit number. Okay, so I get a different presentation of the data for that type of pick list. And this is the same document, by the way. They're just different scenarios that I copy paste into my document here for PowerPoint. But you can see here there's actually an SKU with a specific unit number of 23 and all the zeros, 400D here that I had to go and find. And in effect, I didn't want to get presented with all my choices in the yard. So slightly different. And then in effect, I'm going to fill in the boxes again. Quantity picked. Did I find it? How many have I found? And coming in future releases will be the inspections, right? So already there is inspections in SyteLine for equipment, okay, on the service order that you probably know. Some of you will already know that. We're going to develop more than that. But in effect, it's a checkbox today that says, yep, I found the piece of equipment. I followed an external document that's not included in SyteLine today, and I did the required inspection. And then I loaded it onto the truck, or clearly perhaps that would be I loaded it onto the customer's truck if he comes and, does a will call or something, or he turns up at a rental counter. So it's the same concept as a standard pick list. It's just being tailored, for heavy equipment and the rental industry. And it handles the equipment being assigned at the rental contract line and then producing the pick list, or it handles the ability for the guy in the yard to go and find that piece of equipment if it hasn't been specified in the office. Coming towards the end of the PowerPoint, we then have to know how much profit we're making, right? So, is our rental business making money? Okay. So I'm making some obvious statements over here, but income generally in SyteLine comes from two places. I have my contract revenue, okay, and I also potentially could be charging the customer based on services I'm performing for them while they've got my equipment. So there could also be a revenue stream coming from the service order. The cost comes from three places. In effect, it also comes from a service order potentially. If I have sent technicians into the field to repair the equipment, there'll be costs there as well. I could have re-rented a piece of equipment for this rental contract of mine. So I've now got purchase orders coming in as part of my cost, but by far and above, the majority of cost in the rental world comes from the equipment itself. Okay, so predominantly the cost of equipment is twofold. It's the purchase of the asset and the subsequent depreciation of that asset. And then it's the constant ongoing maintenance of that piece of equipment. And that is the lion's share of costs. We can almost say the service order and the purchase order are almost irrelevant if you have your own fleet. And we are going to release capability for equipment to have cost, its own cost, in September 2022 release. So that we know about it. It's coming. Today, we don't have that as part of the cost. This is a report that captures all those elements, right? It has the contract, it has the contract line, it has the service orders that you've attached to it, it has the purchase orders that you've attached to it, and it will tell you the profitability of each contract and each contract line. There are 4 ways to run the report. So you can look at it by item number. So, all of my forklifts, for example, how much money, how much profit, how much margin are we making on forklift trucks? That would be the item number. How much money am I making on a particular forklift truck? That obviously is the unit number. How much money am I making for each customer? And then how much money we're making for each contract. So it really depends how you run the report as to the answer that you get. These are standard Mongoose reporting tools. It's not Burst Business Analytics or anything like that. These are just standard Mongoose reports. And obviously the key to that is to have a start and an end date. It's I want to look at it last week, last month, the last 6 months, whatever you wish. So you obviously put a start date and an end date in there as well. And you're going to get all I wouldn't say all, you're going to get a nice intro level reporting capability for profitability of contracts. Native mobile functionality, that will be released in June 2022. I'm hoping to give you a demo of it in about 5 minutes. And that is primarily aimed at proof of delivery. So it's for a driver predominantly. If you picture the truck is leaving the yard and it's got one or many pieces of equipment on, depending on the size of the equipment and the truck. I want to capture a signature when I get to the construction site or the customer's premises to say, yep, you have taken delivery of these pieces of equipment. Right now, it would be like a packing list, if you think, it would be the classic. We would hand the driver the packing list, and he'd get his pencil out, and the person would sign at the bottom, and then probably would scan that document, no doubt, and attach it to the contract when it got back to the office. But what most people want today is instant gratification, native mobile, and this is native. It's not a Mongoose tool. Okay, it is native. It's written in Xamarin. It'll be available on Apple and Android. You don't need internet connection. You can work offline. And that will be available. I'm going to show it to you. I think it's nearly there now. I think we're early on the delivery of this functionality, but we're telling everybody it will be available in June. It would be nice to release sooner, and if we can get it sooner, we will release it sooner, of course. What's then coming is the opposite of that in September, which is the collection of that equipment. Ultimately, we get the instruction from the office that the customer has called us and said, please come and pick that equipment up. We're finished with it. Or maybe they have a fleet of equipment. This could be a large construction job, and they have 10, 20 pieces of our equipment, and they might be calling one of them off. Please, you've got 3 cranes with us. We're only using 2 now. The contract is winding down. Please come and pick up one of your cranes. And again, we'll be able to introduce the collection of equipment into the mobile in September 2022, which will be 3 months after the first delivery of our mobile. Also coming in September, we've started work on this. It's very early and I don't have anything to show you. Is, like I mentioned with that whole pick list, we want to do all of that electronically. We want the yard people to be able to electronically pick the equipment, inspect the equipment, and load the equipment, and ultimately they will check it out as well on that mobile device. And that again is the opposite, where a contract ends, the truck comes through the yard door, and in effect he's then doing the opposite, right? He's offloading the truck, he's putting it into an inspection area, inspecting it, and potentially returning it to the rental fleet, or maybe it goes off onto a service order to have more extensive repairs before it actually comes back into the rental fleet. And that also will be available on native mobile in September. Okay, so what have we got coming up? You've seen some of it. June is the native mobile for proof of delivery. September is native mobile for proof of collection and yard management. September will also bring us that all-important equipment cost so that we can, in effect, give us a fairly true picture of the true profitability of our rental business, because without equipment cost, really we don't have that. Contract upsell is also coming in September as well. You're on the phone and somebody wants to rent a piece of equipment. Well, how many things could you also add to that rental contract that you should be prompting the person on the phone to talk to the prospect about? And secondly, how many things could you sell? Not everything is a rental contract. So we want to prompt the users to go in both directions. Hey, would you like to buy some hard hats and some lubricants and some chains and ropes and all this type of thing? And that is also coming in September, which is the concept of upselling. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the best price calculator, where automatically the system will try and offer the customer the best price once they go beyond a period of time. And that was my example where I said 3 days is okay, but once I go to a 4th day, the weekly price becomes a more favorable price for the customer. So that's what we're launching with, and that's what we're working on today that, is right in front of us and will be available in the fall. And then longer term, I believe this is my last slide. This is, in effect, the roadmap. This is the 3-year roadmap for the product. We hope this changes. This is somebody sat in a dark room, trying to give a picture of what the rental customer will be looking for through time. Inevitably, as the product gets out there and it gets in the hands of our users, we hope this roadmap changes quite dramatically and the industry starts telling us what they need. So this roadmap, I would tell you today, is the basis of what we believe when we set out a year ago in February 2021. But nevertheless, we are looking for input from our early customers and our early adopters. So what have we got on here? Well, a self-serve rental portal. People don't really want to be answering phones. They want to be taking the cost out of that. There's really very little value to be added when a customer calls and asks if you have something at this price during these dates, and all that should be really self-serve on the internet. Most people feel comfortable self-serving themselves as well, and that's coming in our roadmap. When you're into vehicles, it gets complicated. Rental tax becomes more complicated than sales tax. So we've done our research. We believe Vertex are dramatically ahead of Avalara in that area. So we will create an interface to Vertex for the vehicle type rental tax. A rental counter, the ability to create rental contracts very quickly, a couple of button clicks as opposed to what you saw on there, which is, a standard SyteLine form with headers and lines and lots of clicks, right? So very, very capable, very deep, but a rental counter needs to be instant. Person sat in front of you and they need instant gratification to pricing, creating contracts very quickly, point of sale scenarios, running credit cards and all that type of thing. So rental counter is also on the roadmap. Enhanced reporting. We've given some very basic reporting today, which is profitability, contract profitability, but we need a whole suite of reports around that, metrics, analytics, and so on. So that is also going to be continually enhanced. It's not like just one day all the reports will be there. We'll be slowly releasing more and more reports over the 3 years. Already mentioned this one, the native mobile for the yard. We've accelerated this, and we don't believe it's really roadmap. I put it on there for completeness, but we do think that will be in our fall release. And the two flows being pick, inspect, load, and check out. And the second flow, for the return of the equipment is check in, inspect, return to inventory or return to the rental fleet, or perhaps be put on hold for deeper service requirements. There'll also be functionality for salespeople in the native mobile. Today, we're thinking about the operational people only. We start with the driver, proof of delivery is where we're starting. That's going to move into completing the driver experience and then having proof of collection. We then move to the yard, secondly, the ability for people to manage the equipment in the yard. And then latterly, we're going to offer the ability for people to have sales input, to be out there, to review contracts, to be able to edit contracts, create new contracts, look at pricing, look up availability. If I'm on site with a customer and they're saying, I know we've got 2 of your cranes over here, but do you guys have any earth movers? Oh, yep, I can see we've got one. They cost you this. Would you like me to create a contract? I can get it out to you later this afternoon. That type of capability is also coming in our native mobile. POs need to be different. Purchase orders need to be very different to how we've launched. A purchase order, in effect, is a fixed amount of money for a fixed amount of time, right? But what we need to do is the purchase order needs to have the same functionality as a contract at the front end. So if I keep that vendor's piece of equipment for a week, then in effect, they're charging me $105 a week. And if I also keep their equipment longer than expected, I have to have a repetitious way of keeping my costs up to date and keeping that vendor paid. Today, I'd have to create another purchase order line for another week, and so on and so forth, and that would become, it is laborious, right? Okay, technically it works, but it's not a slick way of doing it. So we're going to create a purchase order scenario that acts more like a rental contract, but back to our vendor. Next one is misplaced or damaged equipment. Again, very common in the rental industry. They either can't find the equipment that you rented them, or they've damaged it significantly. And upon check-in, a damaged piece of equipment could automatically move to a sales invoice because, in effect, a heavily damaged piece of equipment has been purchased by that customer. Or the obvious one is, they just couldn't find that equipment, we couldn't collect it, and in effect, again, they've purchased that equipment. So what we want to do is, as the equipment is contract end, let's call it, because it might not be a check-in if they can't find it, but as we end that contract line, we need functionality to always move automatically to a sales order opportunity and raise the sales invoice. Next one is equipment leasing and lease accounting. Not everything is in the rental world, but it's very close. The concept of leasing is similar conceptually to renting, but there are different accounting requirements and so on. So we do intend to hit the leasing market as well if you're leasing your equipment as opposed to renting it. And lastly, Salesforce, whether we like it or not, okay, it is the number one CRM system, and we intend to integrate this with Salesforce CRM as well. Okay, I'm now going to try and give you guys a demo, but what I would like to do while I get ready for that, and I'm not sure my success is guaranteed either, so I'm buying myself a little time here. I'd also like to throw it open for questions, Rochelle. I don't know if they've come through the chat or we can just let people fire away, but now's the time to ask your questions.
Gary, I didn't see it in your roadmap. Are you planning to consider doing anything like a repair job on return or anything like that?
Yeah, that's right. That's already there. So when you check in, the system says, would you like to create a linked service repair order? So it's already there. So to answer that question, yes, it's there. Could it be extended? Could it be improved? Yes. But right now, the functionality is there. It's just a button click to say, create a service repair order during the check-in process. And the asset also goes on hold, by the way, at that point. So although you've actually technically taken it back into your yard, the rental team don't see it as available. They see it on hold and unavailable to be rented in the future.
Is there any kind of utilization reporting? Like if you want to see how much of your fleet is sitting unavailable due to, say, being in repair versus just not rented? I don't know if it gets that fine-grained or not.
It's a great question, and it's one I expect to be hit with pretty quickly. Out of the box, no, there isn't a rental utilization report, but it's part of that. I talked about that constant enhancement of our reporting capability. We haven't got it in our first release. I think very quickly, just the fact that you've asked for it, and I mentally can't sleep over that report not being there as well. That is a report that we will be quickly moving and having available. Super important, I agree with you. And when we create that portal as well, what we have today, and I didn't mention it in the presentation, we have what we call an on-rent report as well. And it's the same data for our on-rent report that feeds the utilization data as well. And what it does, it allows a customer at any time to request their on-rent report, of course. Hey, how much equipment do I have with you today? Because these guys lose track, right? They take one piece, they take another 2 pieces, they take 7 pieces next week. And before you know it, there's a construction site that has 25 pieces of your equipment, and nobody really remembers the scenario. Could be different people ask for that equipment over time. So a common report that is required is that on-rent report that is, on demand. You call it. It's also locked into the customer document profile. So if you run an on-rent report for a customer, it'll take you everything that is in effect, let's call it checked out today, for contracts for that customer. You can send that to the customer through the customer document profile. That is going to be available in the portal, of course. So if a customer comes into the portal and wants to self-serve themselves with such information, then they will also have access to that. But that was a hell of a long-winded answer, wasn't it, to say, no, it's not available in the first release. It keeps me awake, I can tell you, and we're going to be quickly having that report in there. All right, I'm just going to stop sharing, and I'm going to pray to the mobile technology gods that I can show you my phone here. So just bear with me a second, and as I say, people feel free, I can dual task, I can answer questions and do that as well. Okay, I'm not going to give this more than a few minutes because I tried earlier today and I struggled. Definition of madness, right? Do the same thing and expect a different result, but I am going to give it a try. There's only 3 minutes left. Okay, well, looks like we're going to end on a negative. I apologize, everybody. I've tried to make my phone application here, which is pretty much finished, guys. So just give you a level of optimism. What I have here is close to the finished product. We have a launch date of June for this, which is the driver proof of delivery mobile app, which is written in Xamarin that works natively on the smartphone or tablet. And this is working. I'm not showing you a mock-up. This is it, and it's on my phone. And it works great until I try and make it share with Teams, and then it just won't. So, Rochelle, I think I'm finished giving these good people an overview of what we have here. And it doesn't sound like there's any more questions coming. I've left up the splash page. Hopefully everybody can see it with people to contact if you want to know more. So that seems to be it. Rochelle, we finished a few minutes early.
Thank you, Gary. And we'd like to thank everyone for participating today in our demonstration. If you have any questions that were not asked, please feel free to submit them to the email addresses you see on the screen, and we'll respond promptly. We also look forward to seeing you at the Sun Conference in March in Orlando at our booth or in our session where you can see a live demonstration of this solution. Have a great day.